walk into a GRC interview and start talking about firewalls and code, you've already lost. Here's what nobody tells you. GRC is over 80% soft skill, stakeholder negotiation, risk reporting, policy enforcement, executive presence. That's what they're actually testing. So today, I'm going to give you two things. First, the exact script to translate your background into language hiring managers understand. And second, a real technical scenario question, the one that trips up almost every candidate, and the four-step framework to answer it with total authority. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly what to say when it counts. Let's get into it. Translate your background when an interviewer asks you to describe a time when you managed risk or enforced compliance. Don't describe the task, describe the business impact. Here's what that sounds like in practice. Scenario 1, asset auditing and accountability. Don't say, I was responsible for quarterly inventory checks and made sure no gear went missing. I want you to say this instead. I directed enterprise level asset compliance audits across multi-million dollar inventories. I implemented continuous control, monitoring, and standard operating frameworks that resulted in 100% asset accountability with zero compliance finding across multiple inspection cycles. Here's scenario 2. This is enforcing policy when people push back. Don't say, I enforced this standard because it was an order and non-compliance was not an option. I want you to say this instead. I acted as a governance lead, translating organization-wide compliance mandates to cross-functional teams. I focused on stakeholder buy-in, clearly communicated the risk of non-compliance to leadership, and resolved friction while maintaining 100% regulatory adherence. You did the same work either way. The only thing that changed is the frame. Internal controls, governance, stakeholder alignment, that's the language they're listening for. Now, here's the one you need to be ready for. In mid to senior GRC interviews, you will almost certainly get a third-party risk management question. And it sounds like this. When onboarding a critical SaaS vendor that marketing needs live last week, during the risk assessment, they failed a key access control requirement. What would you do? Most candidates freeze or they give a rigid answer like, I'll reject the vendor. And that's the wrong answer. GRC is a business enabler, not a blocker. Here's the four-step framework that gets the right answer every time. Step 1, quantify the inherent risk. You don't just say yes or no. You ask, what data does this vendor touch? Public marketing data or sensitive PII or intellectual property. That determines the real blast radius. Step 2, assess compensating controls. You have to engage the vendor and your internal technical team. If they're missing multi-factor authentication on a module, can you restrict access through IP whitelisting, single sign-on, or network segmentation instead? Step 3 is formalize the risk acceptance, the process. If there is no compensating control and the business still wants to move forward, you don't decide that alone. GRC identifies and quantifies risk. The business owner accepts it. You draft a formal risk acceptance form. The vulnerability the financial and compliance impact, and the remediation timeline with a sunset clause. Step 4 is executive communication. This is where you're briefing the senior leadership with an objective risk summary. So leadership makes an informed decision before anything gets signed off. Walk through those 4 steps out loud in an interview, and you've just proven you understand framework, vendor risk, and executive workflow in under a minute. 3 things to keep you front and center the whole conversation. Executive present. Speak calmly. Don't rush. Never bash a previous team or leader. Show you can sit through a high pressure audit without getting rattled. Business alignment. To make it clear, your goal is to help the company grow safely, not slow it down with bureaucracy for its own sake. Your background gave you the backbone to hold the line on compliance, even when a team is pushing you to look the other way. Say that plainly. Here's your assignment. What's your biggest fear going into a technical cybersecurity interview? Tell me in the comments. Let's work through it together. If you missed part 1 on skill mapping or part 2 on the certification roadmap, they're linked below. Subscribe and turn on notifications. Part 4 wraps up the series with your first 90 days as a GRC analyst. So you walk in on day 1 already knowing how to win. I'll see you there.